It's time we get to the bottom of these Tampa Bay Buccaneer wide receivers, Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer, and Jalen McMillan. Everybody's been looking at them on the waiver wire or on the rosters all week, wondering which one's going to hit. Which wide receiver is going to be the guy? Is there going to be a guy? Is there going to be two guys? Is this going to be at random game for game? We're going to deep dive these wide receivers, go over the advanced analytics, go over the situation to help you make your decisions so you can figure out which wide receiver you want on your fantasy football team. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're doing these deep dives every day, all day long, on as many players as possible, on as many situations as possible. We're going deep on the waiver wire. We're using videos to help you set your lineups. Click that button. Stop missing out. Ric Flair's watching you. Do not disappoint Ric Flair. But we are looking at a large dichotomy between Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, and Trey Palmer. All three of these wide receivers do different things on the field. All three of these wide receivers have ways in which they can help you in fantasy football, which makes this very interesting. Everybody's been hot on Jalen McMillan because he is the trendy rookie wide receiver. Sterling Shepard's the vet. Trey Palmer's in his second season. I'm excited to talk about him. He has a lot of upside in this game. But let's go to Todd Bowles. Let's see what he has to say about these wide receivers.
If they bring something different, it'll be great because we have to tweak our offense now to what they bring to the table as opposed to what Mike and Chris brings to the table. So it'll be a challenge for the coaches as well as the players. But I'm excited to see them play. I think they have more that meets the eye that we haven't seen yet. So I'm excited to see them.
Sterling Shepard. I mean, for his track record, he does have that relationship previously with Waiver, and it was a long time ago. But there is some palpable chemistry that's out there, and it has resulted in already a touchdown this season. Just how could you lean on that and his experience going forward?
Well, he's been a heck of a receiver in this league. When healthy, he can make plays all over the field. So we've seen that briefly the last couple of weeks. He'll be counted on more to do that, counted on more to help the young guys come along, and we expect him to play well.
Todd Bowles is usually pretty straight up, and what he's excited about is changing up the offense and see how he can adapt this offense to these wide receivers. So things are going to look vastly different coming up. That's pretty much what he said. Not vastly maybe, but things are going to look different because they're tuning things up to these wide receivers. So there's not going to be a Chris Godwin role or a Mike Evans role. It's going to be changed up and different for these wide receivers. So we're excited to see how they're going to change things up in the offense. But each guy has their role. Each guy has different ways in which they can win on the field. And he's excited to see what they can do with these wide receivers. And looking at what we saw in week 7 here, we saw some opportunities for these wide receivers to really hit in your fantasy lineup. Chris Godwin led the team in routes. Trey Palmer, after Mike Evans went out, ran 42 routes. What does that tell you? That tells you that Trey Palmer has the upside for the deep ball, getting those deep targets. That's what they have in mind for Trey Palmer. Look at Mike Evans, 19 average depth of target. Look at Trey Palmer, 16. Looks like he's going to be running the deep routes downfield. Looks like he'll be getting the deep targets, the deep volume. That's important to note as we dissect these wide receivers going forward. Jalen McMillan soaked up the targets, ran on 60% of the routes, ran more routes than Sterling Shepard, and got more targets than every wide receiver not named Chris Godwin. So he's able to soak up volume in the offense, get a lot of work. Trey Palmer ran more routes and got a lot of the deep routes downfield. Sterling Shepard was there. He was getting opportunities, but got one target in this matchup. Jalen McMillan was getting opportunities. So it might shake out like this because Baker Mayfield's the guy doing the pre-snap reads. He's the one slinging the rock, and he might be going more to Jalen McMillan. But he also, in certain situations, might need to be pushing it deep, like we saw with Mike Evans, be looking at Trey Palmer. Sterling Shepard, though, might be getting more run in the slot. 40% of his snaps were in the slot. Even though he ran on just 28 routes, He might be just in the slot most of the time, and they're going to move Jalen McMillan in and out of the slot as well. He ran a lot of snaps in the slot back at Washington, and he plays very well out of the slot. But Jalen McMillan, you can move him all over the place. But looking at these numbers, it's advantageous for Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer for certain situations. And we're wondering what's up with Sterling Shepard. But Sterling Shepard, though, has been a hot piece in this offense a few weeks prior to that game. And he's been the NFL for a long time. He is a crafty veteran, and he was a top-tier wide receiver asset coming into the NFL back then. And we've been able to stick around in the NFL for quite some time, almost a decade, even though dealing with injuries, the ups and downs. That's because we're dependable, we're nuanced, we're good at the position, and we can help NFL teams. Trey Palmer, 4.33 speed. We can stretch the field. We can also be electric off the release. We're a crafty route runner. Jalen McMillan, he's definitely the most dynamic route runner between the two young wide receivers, especially in the short game, especially when it comes to creating separation. We saw that in training camp. Trey Palmer, though, nasty downfield, nasty ball skills, an underrated playmaker from Nebraska. He was underrated last year. He has the upside to be the dark horse here of this wide receiver depth chart. He has the speed to stretch it. He's also better than advertised when it comes to route running. That's what Jalen McMillan's really known for. He has sticky hands, can create separation. Palmer can do that, but he can also get vertical in a hurry downfield. So you're going to see air yards from him and deep targets. You're going to see Jalen McMillan create separation, soak up targets, get moved around the offense. You're going to see Sterling Shepard have a rapport with Baker Mayfield, get his opportunities. And Sterling Shepard has been productive, but it was back in 2020. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since Sterling Shepard has been a top-tier producer or have been able to produce top-tier numbers at the NFL level when it comes to fantasy football production. And he was on the practice squad going into the season, and he was not upgraded from the practice squad to the active roster until Jalen McMillan got hurt. So Jalen McMillan was over Sterling Shepard going in to Sterling Shepard's last few weeks of production. So remember that. But Sterling Shepard was a wait-and-see type of deal due to the ACL tear, due to the injuries that he has been enduring and coming back from. But when we look at Sterling Shepard, this is a wide receiver that's been around the league and also has a rapport of Baker Mayfield back at Oklahoma. And we're looking at reports that some people prefer Sterling Shepard in this offense because he is a crafty route runner. He is nuanced. He's been around the league. He's been able to be productive in this league at a small level, but he's been able to get the job done. He's a very dependable player. You're looking at Jalen McMillan. He's a rookie. He's a very good cerebral route runner. He's very technical. He's got a lot of upside here. It took a little bit time for him to break out at the college level, but when he did, he was outshining Rome Odunze a little bit. He was outshining Jalen Polk, and then injuries came in. Had a 22.84% market share of the passing production. That's the rate of ownership of the passing yards shared among all the other wide receivers. That was at 20 years old in 2022. The next year we get hurt, still get a 10% market share rate in that offense. But Todd Bowles is back, and he wants to talk about Jalen McMillan a little bit.
Just getting on the same page and getting the routes down and understanding coverages a little better. My message was play like he did in college. Play just like he did in college. He was a great player in college. We think he's a great player now. He just hasn't had the experience yet.
That tells me a lot about Jalen McMillan. Tells me he likes Jalen McMillan. Tells me that he's good with him. Tells me that there's really not much in development. Just get a little bit better and the finer nuances. And he was also prompted to say that by the questions that were asked. There's always room for growth, especially with Todd Bowles. But he likes what he saw of him coming out of college. And he's saying, hey, let them nuts hang and play, dude. You got those skills, and we saw those skills in training camp. We saw that about every single day. He was making a highlight grab, and he built a rapport with Baker Mayfield. And we covered those highlights about once a week in training camp. About once a week. With Baker Mayfield, Jalen McMillan, and they were highlights one after one, moving him around in the offense, making big plays, big catches. I'm probably the reason why the fantasy football community got so hyped about him, because these videos went off, and then on top of that, he was looking good. He was making the plays. He was making it happen. He was looking good in the offense. He was getting run, and he was getting run early in his career. As we look at the numbers here, the first 3 weeks of the season, he was running a lot of routes. He was in on 84.3% of the routes. He ran a high route participation rate in the first 3 weeks of the season before he got hurt. And when he got hurt, that's when they had to elevate Sterling Shepard off the practice squad. He would not be here if Jalen McMillan didn't get hurt. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans did not get hurt as well. Everything looked the same as weeks 1 through 3 right now. We wouldn't be having a situation with Sterling Shepard. He'd be an afterthought right now. But a Jalen McMillan injury going into week 4 caused that. But we ran a lot of routes. The targets weren't really there, because why would you target him over Chris Godwin and Mike Evans? But he was getting some opportunity. He was getting 2 targets a game, but we were running a lot of routes. We ran 86 routes during that time, almost 30 routes per game. And I know the targets weren't there, but the fact that he was on the field as a rookie, looking good after training camp, getting that much run in the offense is huge for a young player like that. That says everything. That says that Todd Bowles and the coaching staff saw Jalen McMillan, what he was doing on the field, and said, hey, we got to get this guy in. Trey Palmer, 16 routes during that time. We got to get this guy in. We got to get this guy some opportunities. But Trey Palmer, when you talk about him as a prospect coming out for last year's draft, he was one of my favorite dart throw wide receivers for rookie drafts. 1,000 yards with Nebraska. So we transferred from LSU to Nebraska. We instantly hit with over a 30% market share of Nebraska's passing production, which is huge. A 4-star prospect coming out of high school, we go to LSU. We go to the wide receiver U and play with and behind some of the top wide receivers in the National Football League and in the country. And now we go to Nebraska and we get the job done. We get ourselves drafted, and now we're with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That year with Nebraska, a 13.5 average depth of target. We got that 4.3 speed, remember? And it's shown on the football field with your depth of target. Getting downfield, 3.26 yards per route ran. This can be an efficient wide receiver. He's very effective downfield. He's got ball skills. We saw it last year in small samples with Tampa Bay. And last year, he gave you spike weeks in air yards. 154 against Detroit, 104 against the Saints, and 82 against Carolina. And of course, this isn't going to be steady with this because you got Mike Evans there. He's your air yards monster. You got Chris Godwin soaking up a lot of targets. Trey Palmer has the upside when implemented in this offense to garner those deep targets. And we talk about this with a lot of wide receivers and about the Will Fuller effect, where if you're getting those deep targets, some of them are going to get overthrown. They're going to be contested, hard to bring in, maybe even dropped, batted away. And then those ones that you bring in, those once in a few, you get a couple of those in a game. 1, 2, you could go off. Trey Palmer's a wide receiver you do not forget about. You look at him closely. And when I look at these wide receivers, I think you can tell by how excited I get. I like Jalen McMillan the most for the long-term upside. When I think about Sterling Shepard, I think odds are pretty good. He's going to get targets. He's going to get work. He's going to run a lot of routes. When I think about him, total upside, maybe at best, like a Wan'Dale Robinson-esque player, where there's going to be volume and it's going to be a little bit spiky. Might be consistent, but that's at best. That's at best is what you're going to get. There's no chance really of a league winner out of Sterling Shepard. You might get a good wide receiver that gets you over the hump in some matchups. When I look at Trey Palmer, and I'm thinking about his portfolio from the stats here, what I see, what he did in college, his advanced metrics, what he did at the combine, everything I've seen from last year and this year. I love him for daily fantasy football. I love him in fantasy due to the dark horse nature of him. Those dart throws in your lineup where you just put him in, you just hope he brings in a deep ball. I think he can be productive in spot starts, and you're not going to be really able to predict it, but I would recommend in matchups where there's a 50 over, under, or more. And so if I had to rank it, I would honestly go how I would normally play players in my lineups and pickups: McMillan, Palmer, and Sterling Shepard. Now, if you're a different person and you want to feel safe, if you want to feel like I want the guaranteed targets and I want to feel good about that, you can really play it straight up, even Steven, Shepard, and Jalen McMillan. I think I'd favor more Jalen McMillan because I feel like the targets will be there and I feel like the upside will be there, then Trey Palmer. And I do that because I'm more of a gambler and I like to gamble a little bit more and I like to chase that upside. And if it doesn't hit, then I'd rather miss chasing that than just get a guy that maybe he is the best out of the three when it comes to fantasy scoring. Sterling Shepard is. But when I look at that, what's the odds of him having multiple 20-point weeks, 25-plus point weeks? What's the odds of that? What's the odds that when Mike Evans comes back and we're getting into fantasy playoffs, that he's going to win your year for you? What's the odds on that? How do you feel about that? And even, like, say we get more runs to the running backs, Kate Otten starts blowing up, and these wide receivers don't run like we're supposed to or thinking about. When I think about that, it's okay to miss on the upside then, because at least I took that swing for the fence. That's why I rank him the way I do for me. And I can see ranking the other way for you if you want to play a little safer. But I want to hear in the comments below what you think. I want to hear about that. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.